Good morning, everybody. I want to thank you all for coming today. And it is my sincere pleasure to introduce our speaker for the day at this time. Since she has helped launch EcoHouse at Westminster College in 2007, Shauna Aminath has been fighting for environmental sustainability, both locally and worldwide. Her work in her home country of the Maldives began when, shortly after graduation, she was appointed as the Undersecretary at the Policy Office for President Mohamed Nasheed, where she was responsible for leading the nation's effort to be carbon neutral by 2020. Since then, she has consistently fought for both democratic rule and sound environmental policies for the Maldives, one of the world's most endangered countries, and was recently appointed Minister of Environment, Climate Change, and Technology. Through this conversation, Shauna will give us an overview of her work throughout the past dozen years. She will report on what 2020 meant for her goals and also cast her vision for the future. And so I welcome all of you here today to listen to our presentation from Ms. Shauna Aminath, who is joining us from the Maldives.
Hello, hi, good morning, good evening. It's really a great pleasure to be here at the Chapel since 2008. I've been back to the campus once, and it feels a bit strange to speak to you all the way from the Maldives, from across continents, across oceans, but nevertheless, we're all here. First of all, I want to say that I'll be speaking mostly about the Maldives and what climate change means for the Maldives. And I hope we are able to have a good conversation afterwards. The Maldives is one of the most vulnerable countries in the world to climate change. That makes us a frontline state, although Maldives may be a frontline state now. It almost feels like the entire world is, everywhere in the world is a frontline state. When I was in Westminster, many of my friends from Missouri, from Midwest, from all over the United States, they didn't know where the Maldives was. They didn't know where it even existed. We are a country that's located in the Indian Ocean. We're about 1,190 islands, about 26 atolls. So I used to usually have to explain what an atoll means. It's a group of islands that forms one atoll, and by group of islands, I mean they are all surrounded by a separate reef as well. We are about 500,000 people, so it's very, very small country. Most of the islands are just about 1.5 meters above sea level, which makes us extremely vulnerable to sea level rise, impacts of climate change, such as bad weather, rainfall, and other things such as tidal swells. Our islands are not just vulnerable to climate change, but because we are such a low-lying island nation that is vulnerable to climate change, that makes us extremely vulnerable to economic shocks as well, such as the times that we're living today as COVID-19, a world that is impacted by COVID. Climate change is an existential threat for us. Like I said before, we have flooding annually that affects our islands. Our food security it's affected by the impacts of climate change. Our water table is so low. We have issues relating to saltwater intrusion. We have, because of that, we also have issues with groundwater pollution. Our infrastructure are very vulnerable because of the size of the islands, as well as because it's very exposed to impacts that is resulted because of climate change. We have waterborne diseases such as dengue. I know maybe some of you might not even heard about these things, but we have more throughout the year. We have these mosquito-borne diseases now that's becoming, that used to be seasonal. Our water quality has degraded significantly. None of the islands where people live have access to fresh groundwater anymore. So we have to depend heavily on things like desalination and reverse osmosis for fresh drinking water. We have issues of loss of wetlands and water bodies that actually protect our part, that's part of our protection. We have loss of vegetation and change in weather patterns, or including rainfall. It basically changes the entire system for us. So climate change really is an existential threat for the Maldives. 80% of our islands are just less than a meter above sea level. So we don't really have a higher ground that we can run to. And over 90% of our islands report flooding annually. 97% of our islands report shoreline erosion. And 64% of our islands are experiencing severe erosion. And when you've seen one photo of one of the islands, which is so small, and 50% of our housing structures are just within 100 meters from the coastline. So most really can't withstand tidal floods or swells, or let alone tsunamis. Our income, our food, and our survival really does depend on these vulnerabilities. By this, what I mean is we are also a country that is visited by over 1 million tourists each year to experience the natural beauty that we have. It's one of the most beautiful countries that I've visited. I usually tell people it is the most beautiful country that I've visited, but I do realize that having lived in the United States for so long and in Canada, I think the mountains are equally beautiful as well. But we, over nearly 50% of our income comes from tourism. And we are also a country that is heavily dependent on fishing for employment as well. So that makes what happens to our oceans, and because of climate change, because of pollution, because of dumping waste into our oceans, it really does make us very vulnerable to these things. Sometimes I tell people in different forums that we are usually labeled as a small island country, but we are 1% land and 99% ocean. We also have the world's 7th largest coral reef system, which makes us actually a very large ocean state. So we're not a small island state, we're a very large ocean state. Just about 3 weeks ago, I think, or within the month, the IPCC report came out, and it is really indisputable that human activities are causing climate change. And human influence is making extreme climate events, extreme heat waves, extreme heavy rainfall, droughts, and more frequent and severe. And this is not a photo from the Maldives. This is actually a photo from New York. And I'll be in New York over the weekend. So climate change is really no longer just a problem for frontline states such as the Maldives. I think that it has really breached the front lines and is overrunning the capital. So when I used to live in Missouri, we usually have these talks about people have not seen how it impacts them. But I think it's more and more evident and frequent that extreme weather events are, everyone is experiencing these things all around the world. Just this year, Germany was flooded, China's been flooded, India's flooded, Japan's flooded, New York is flooded, while the other side of the States is also burning with heat waves. So it really is not a matter of debate. I think the science is so clear on this. So the question is, the Maldives is a really vulnerable country, and we are also, the greenhouse gas that we emit as a country is actually negligible. But I always think that I don't think we should always we should always feel like we're victims of it. I think that we can also be victors in the sense that yes, we are a very small country, but what I always say is that if the Maldives can do things to address the impacts of climate change, the entire world can do as well. So what are we doing as a government to do these things? We have the world's most sustainable tuna fisheries. We catch our fish, each tuna, one by one, pole and line fishing. We also have a target to become net zero emissions by 2030. So we can shift our economy from running on diesel to running on sunshine, which is in abundance. But these are also not without our challenges. Our islands are really small, so that makes us really, we have a difficult, although we have sunshine throughout the day, we don't have a lot of space for solar. So currently we are doing feasibilities for how we can use our lagoons and the ocean space for floating solar, which is very new technology at the moment. Because we don't have fresh water in the Maldives, we have almost every island is heavily dependent on bottled water for drinking. And this has again created another big problem for us. We have a very big plastic problem. So our government, we have pledged to phase out single-use plastics by 2023, which is in just 2 years. So one of my biggest policy areas as a minister is to ensure that we implement this. We already have started implementing this policy. We have brought the necessary legislative amendments, and we have banned single-use plastics, such as plastic straws, also things like that's the smallest bottles for water and things like so. And we're currently working with our parliament to ban production of single-use plastics within the Maldives as well. While we're doing this, we are also implementing policies to stop open burning of garbage. These things may sound very foreign, but 20 years ago, we didn't have a problem of waste, but now our island, the people's lifestyles have changed, people's quality of living have changed, things that we depend on survival and living have changed as well. So this is, I think after climate change, number one environmental problem at a national level for us is the problem of waste. So finding ways to sustainably manage, finding ways to change people's behavior, and finding ways to dispose of waste in an environmentally friendly way is a huge challenge. So we have to bring in new technology as well, which is something we're doing right now. And another thing that we are doing in our government is also, we have a target to protect 20% of our marine resources by 2030. Currently, we're working with the Waits Institute. It's a US-based, American-based institution to do the necessary marine surveys that is required for this. The reason why we have to do surveys is, I'll explain it to you, because the minute that we say that we have to protect 20% of our marine resources, our fishermen are very sensitive to these things. So people feel that protection means that they can't really use these resources. So this is it's a process where we have to engage with our community to also, in a meaningful way, to convince them and to have a dialogue that it doesn't mean that they're the ocean where they depend on income and employment will come to an end. It only means that we are going to sustainably manage these resources in a way that we can continue to use these resources for fishing as well. So that's why we are doing marine surveys to tell people that these are areas that we need to have a management plan to be able to have continue the fishing in a sustainable way. So one of the things that I usually tell is that I've been to many COPs, and COPs is where all world leaders, governments, institutions, or UN agencies, everyone go there to talk about what can we do about climate change. And I've been to many COPs since 2008, and I feel like we just don't have the time to keep negotiating, because we may have a lot of rooms in the UN, or in the next COP is going to be in Glasgow, in these conference rooms, but the planet doesn't have room for negotiations. So one thing that we will be really pushing for during this upcoming negotiations in Glasgow is that countries like the Maldives, we really don't have the time. And the IPCC report clearly states that we're talking about another 2 or 3 decades, and that's in our lifetime. And if we don't work together as countries, as leaders, as institutions, to prevent the planet from heating, to keep it below 1.5 degrees, countries like the Maldives won't be able to survive. I mean, we might not be taken over by waves, but it will become uninhabitable. So these are things that we really need to ask the hard questions and call on larger emitters to be more ambitious. Like I said before, for me, science is so clear. Even 10 years ago, I would be able to see healthy coral reefs like what you're seeing in this photo, but not anymore. We don't see these kind of habitats just by snorkeling. So you have to go dive in deeper to be able to see more healthier reefs. And every year is becoming a record warm year. So it's not giving enough time for the reefs to really adjust to what's happening. Coral reefs are very resilient, but if every year is becoming a record warm year, they won't be able to adjust to these changes. They won't be able to come back. They won't be able to recover from the loss. And these systems are really sensitive to surface temperature changes. So science is really very clear to me. I see it every day, what's happening to our ecosystems. So that's where I just gave a very brief overview of what's happening in the Maldives, and to connect what has happened since I left Westminster. In the introduction, I left Westminster in 2008, and then I joined the government. And then in 2012, what happened was we had a coup. And after that, we were out on the streets, basically, trying to get back our country on the democratic track. And in 2018, we won the elections, and since then we've been in government. And since 2018 to until this year, I was working as the policy secretary in the president's office. And I just recently have been appointed as a minister of environment. And I think democracy is such an important part of what we can do at home for climate change as well, because what happened was in 2008, we pledged to become a carbon neutral country. And then in 2012, the government that pledged to do that was overthrown in a violent coup. And then the people who came in after that obviously didn't really care about these things and didn't really wasn't their priority. And now again, we're back on track, and hopefully we'll be able to continue the work that we originally wanted to do. But democracy is messy, and it's a lot of give and take and compromises as well. And I think governance is so important in terms of being able to deliver policies that really is good for the planet as well as for the people of the country. So I'll just leave it there, and maybe we can have a discussion on anything else that you'd like to clarify as well.
So you can talk to them.
All right, thank you, Shauna, so much for sharing your slides and all of that information with us today. Shauna has arranged to leave approximately the next 30 minutes for us to have some question and answer. So how that's going to work is that Tyler over here to my right has a microphone. If you have a question, please raise your hand. Tyler will come over with the microphone, and then you can ask your question and interact with Shauna.
Hi, Shauna. This is Hassan Sipra, class of 2011. How are you doing? Thanks for a wonderful overview of what the Maldives is doing in terms of climate change. I'm wondering, with the COP coming up now and with the most recent IPCC report that's pretty damning for climate change, what exactly is like the coalition of small island developing states? What is it that they can actually push for fossil fuel reduction, realistically speaking? Thank you.
Thank you, Hassan. Really nice to hear from you. I can't seem to turn on my video, but I don't know if you can see. Anyways, with regards to what can we do as small island countries, states to push for emission reductions. I think that's something that we will be pushing as a country, for larger states such as the United States, EU, Australia. We really need to see more ambition from these countries. And we have a climate emergency, and it's not for us, it's not a matter of if or when. It is happening right now for us. And what we are doing in the Maldives is we have pledged to become net zero by 2030. And my question is, if the Maldives can do it, so can the United States, so can the UK, Germany, Australia, China, India as well. And one of the things that we will be pushing in COP is also that we are a frontline state, and the climate finance that was pledged by developed countries in the Paris Agreement we're not even near our target of $100 billion. And countries like the Maldives have received really very, very little for climate change adaptation. And what I mean by adaptation is, you have seen in our photos, in the photos that I used in the slides, that our islands are eroding. We are facing a lot of changes in our country's ability for food production, our fishing grounds, everything is being affected by it. But we have been approved just 2 projects from the Global Climate Fund, GCF, for climate change adaptation. So that means if the most vulnerable countries are not really getting enough finances for adaptation, I don't know who really is being benefiting from these things. So this is another thing that we'll be really pushing. We need a complete overhaul of the financial system to address climate change. We hear about green financing and all these things, but countries like the Maldives are not really benefiting from it.
Hi, Shauna. My name is Shelby Harrison, and I just wanted to say thank you so much. You were very inspiring. I wanted to ask, how do we get people to care? There are still so many people in the United States that don't even believe that climate change exists. And even people of the Fulton community and the students who go here continue to litter and throw litter on the ground. It almost seems like there needs to be a bigger step than what we can actually take. So I just wanted to ask for maybe some advice on how to get people to care.
That's a really good question. Something that this is a quote that I found, or I fell in love with when I was in Westminster, when we were trying to set up the EcoHouse, was, I can't remember the exact quote now, but it was something along these lines. People will only conserve what they love, and they'll only love what they know, and they'll only know what they're taught. So I think really education is such an important part of really for people to care about it. When I mean, my friends in Westminster, and I have many friends in Missouri. I had never thought in my life that I'll have friends in Missouri, for instance. All of my friends know what's happening in the Maldives now. They understand how climate change is a big issue for us. So I think education is such an important part of it. And I think international education is a really important part of it too. We were able to discuss all these issues in a multi-disciplinary, multicultural setting. And for us to, I think, share our experiences and share our knowledge and share what it means, education plays a very important part. And I think that kind of friendships and that kind of experiences really will make a difference.
We have a question from the Zoom chat from Gray. He said, if climate change continues its current trajectory and ends up with irreversible damage, what plans are there, if there even can be any, for the refugees that would arise from the countries like the Maldives?
See, the thing is, I try to avoid this question because we don't want to be refugees, and that's the place where we need policy intervention. We need global leaders. We need everyone to prevent global climate change or planet from heating from beyond 1.5 degrees, because that's exactly what we want to prevent. We have seen what happens to countries when there's civil wars, when there's conflict, and we don't want to add to climate change as a point of conflict So I think, well, from the IPCC report, we still have time, another 30 years maybe, to, if we really work hard with everyone, to prevent Maldivians from becoming refugees, or people from other Pacific islands, from coastal areas from becoming refugees. So we don't have plans if there even can be any for refugees, we don't have a plan. And I don't think the world has a plan either for refugees and migration.
Shauna, it's John Langton. How are you, my friend?
So good to hear you, Dr. John.
Shauna, it's John Langton.
Yes, Dr. John, I can hear you. How are you?
I'm fine. I've retired now, but I want to congratulate you on the use that you've put to your Westminster College education, and we're so proud of you and the work you've done to promote democracy and climate responsibility in the Maldives. I guess I just want to ask you, what's the main thing that perhaps we can do here at Westminster or the United States to help preserve the Maldives?
Dr. John, I think my answer to that really is still the same to what we discussed back in Westminster as well. I think telling your government how important it is to be more ambitious and cut down emissions. I was really excited to hear new plans and changes that has taken place since the new government as well, which has really put more importance on climate change. So it's good to see the US policy on climate change is back on track again, but we need more ambition on cutting down emissions at a national level. At an individual level, I think there's a lot you can do, because that's where it really starts.
We have one more question from the Zoom chat. Heather McCrae asks, at this point, is tourism more helpful or hurtful? Do you encourage people to go to the resorts in order to support the Maldives' efforts economically, or do you recommend a lower level of tourism to reduce water use, etc.?
I was recently on an interview with CNN, and that's exactly the question that we were asked as well. Because we depend so much on tourism, we don't want to ask people to not come to countries like the Maldives. And my answer to that has been, we have such advanced technology now that we should really invest more to find ways to, in transportation, find a cleaner technology for transportation. So I think if we put in all our efforts, knowledge, money, time, and technology, and everything that we have, we can still really change the transport sector.
We have one more question from the Zoom chat. This one's an anonymous attendee. So they asked, in addition to the general apathy and even blatant denial, there are quite a few people who could potentially lose their livelihoods, even with the bare minimum restrictions to climate change, especially those who work in coal and oil industries. Many of these people are not in a position to be retrained for other jobs. How can we get these people on board and convince them that cutting into their industries are worth it?
I'll give an example from the Maldives, and that's a very valid question. Providing alternative livelihood opportunities for those who are employed in these sectors, it's very important this is an important point for governments to really address. From the Maldives, what happened was in 2000, 2011, the Maldives decided to ban shark fishing. And we had a lot of fishermen who depended on shark fishing. And I was involved in this policy change at the time. And what happened was we had to go island by island, home to home, fisherman to fisherman, explain to them why we need to ban shark fishing. We need engagement at community level to really show that we care about their livelihoods and their employment as well. At the same time, we also introduced alternative livelihood opportunities for these people whose lives were dependent on shark fishing. We also had a scheme where the government bought back the fishing gear that they had. So it was a phased out approach where we were sensitive to their concerns as well. I think, first of all, understanding that these are very valid concerns and these are issues that are related to people's lives, employment, and everything they have, and finding alternative employment opportunities and livelihood programs is and should be gradual as well.
Shauna, can I ask a follow-up question to that? In my Westminster seminar class, this is Dr. Holliday, we saw that the Maldives was on the forefront of new environmental engineering projects. So collaborating with the Dutch Docklands to create floating cities, as well as producing something called the City of Hope. Can you speak about some of those environmental engineering and architectural strides that the Maldives has taken?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and this is a private, public-private partnership where we are also, we want to bring in new technology, and this is one of the areas that we want to see more investments in. This particular engagement with the Dutch Docklands has also come at a time when it first was introduced in 2008, and we're currently working with them to establish, use floating technology to build cities in near Male area. So in addition to this, we are also working with other cutting-edge technology as well to see how we can adapt to climate change, such as even using I think we should be able to use 3D technology as well to see how we can rehabilitate our coral reefs. And so these are things, this is what I mean. In addition to access to finance, countries like the Maldives also need access to technology to adapt quickly and to prevent an environmental catastrophe.
Hi, Shauna. My name is Joyce, and I'm currently a junior at Westminster College. First, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to come speak with us today. And my question is, how would you reply to climate change deniers or those who insist this change had no anthropogenic influences?
Sorry, what was your question again? I didn't hear it very clearly.
How would you reply to climate change deniers or those who insist this change had no anthropogenic influences?
Okay, well, first of all, I would ask them to maybe just look around them, you know, it depends from where they come as well. If you're from the US, have a look around and see what's happening in the US. Look what happened in New York just a few weeks ago. See what's happening in California, see what's happening even in Missouri as well. Probably you see more extreme weather patterns now, you see more drought, and these are things that we we can experience, we can see. The rest, I don't think that we can deny it anymore. The science is really very, very clear on this. Come to the Maldives. I'll invite them to come to visit, and we can show what's happening here. We can show what's happening to our fish stocks. We can show what's happening to the glaciers. We can see what's happening to in vegetation, even in the mountain areas.
We have a couple more questions via Zoom. One of them is, what role should religious leaders and institutions play in dealing with climate change?
I think there's a lot that they can do. For example, in the Maldives, we just recently ratified a Climate Emergency Act, where we have a target on reduction for carbon emissions and becoming and net zero emissions by 2030 as well. And part of it is because laws really have an impact on how we live and how we behave as well. So, and managing the industries and human behavior is critical to prevent climate change, more disastrous climate change. So talk to your MP or talk to your elected officials, and elect governments that believe in climate change, elect leaders who really understand what it means.
We have one more question via Zoom. It says, not all countries are equally vulnerable. So are countries extremely vulnerable to climate change coming together and trying to make significant changes?
Yes, we are. For example, I mean, in climate change talks, there are different blocks for negotiations. For instance, we have Alliance of Small Island States, we have Small Island Development States, and we have, for example, we also have Climate Vulnerable Forum, where vulnerable countries have come together as well. So there's a lot of work that vulnerable countries, small island states, small island developing states are doing, and lobbying and putting pressure on leaders and institutions for more ambition and to really, in a meaningful way, address climate change.
Hi, Shauna. I'm Mayanda. I'm a freshman at Westminster College. Thank you so much for giving your time to talk to us. My question is the following. The Maldives is suffering now, but we know that climate change is a global problem, and usually the most vulnerable are the least responsible. And from what I hear, the Maldives has just been doing a lot. Do you not fear that in any way lack of international cooperation can jeopardize or sabotage the Maldives' efforts?
Sorry, can you repeat that again? It was a bit...
I'm sorry. Do you not feel like the lack of international cooperation can sabotage or jeopardize the Maldives' efforts to remediate climate change?
Absolutely. Sometimes it really does feel like we are alone in this. And because I mean, I always go to all these international forums, we meet people, we meet institutions, and then come home and meet our island communities and community leaders. And we hear about everyday problems related to climate change, and to not have the support at international level in terms of climate change adaptation financing, or even commitment in larger countries. It sometimes does feel like a letdown, but I still think that we still have time if we can put together our minds to address climate change. So I want to believe that we can still come together to prevent a climate disaster.
Shauna, I don't believe we have any more questions, but I do know you want to try and play a video. You're welcome to try that now if you want.
No, I wasn't trying to play. I was trying to see if I can be on the video because Westminster, you need to give me access to it. Dr. Young, I think, has a question I can see. What role should religious leaders and institutions play in dealing with climate change? I was in your religion and politics class, and this is something we discussed 10, 15 years ago, I think. And this is it's a very important question. I feel like I have learned so much more, and I keep going back to this class that we had with you about this. The Maldives is also 100% Muslim country. And we also have some people who believe that this is part of what climate change is the end of life, and this is how it should be. But I think that every religion does have views on how we should take care of our planet, and we should be how we can live in harmony with nature as well. So, and in countries like Maldives, where religion does have a very important role in the state, and I think religious leaders can really have an impact on how people think and the way people live as well. So and because they form public opinion, they form worldview, they are influencers in the society. So rather than viewing and explaining to the public that climate change is how it should be, I think religious leaders can really step up and really talk about and be more engaged on how we can live in harmony with our planet rather than destroying.
Shauna, I want to thank you so much for being here with us today. And on that sentiment that this is one planet and we are all one community, I think is a really good message to leave us with. And I appreciate you taking the time out of your exceptionally busy schedule. You're going to be in New York, you said, next week at the UN. And so for you to come here to Fulton, Missouri today means a whole lot to the current EcoHouse students as well as the current students who are in the general population. So with that, I thank everybody for coming today. And the next session is lunch. So please, if you are registered to eat lunch with one of the speakers, head over to the lunch area. And there are obviously after lunch more sessions this afternoon. So thank you all very much.